Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here. It is now into the second half of the month of April and time to look ahead to the hurricane season that is coming rather quickly here to the Atlantic Basin. Officially, the hurricane season begins on June 1st, but of course we can get tropical activity before that. During the month of May, for example. Indeed, I expect it to be quite an active year. We'll also talk about the summertime conditions expected across the nation in terms of temperature and precipitation amounts. The posting of Tropical Outlook is right there on the homepage of arcfieldweather.com, and we'll go through graphics and text that's right there in the posting. So if you want to go back and get more detail, just go right there to the homepage, again, arcfieldweather.com. Let's start off with the executive summary. And again, I expect it to be an above normal season in the Atlantic Basin with more named storms, more hurricanes, and more major hurricanes compared to normal. Also, the ACE index is something we calculate called the accumulated cyclone energy. It should be maybe a 1.5 times normal. That factors in both the magnitude of storms and the longevity of storms. So an active season in the Atlantic Basin. Now, a couple of the important factors here. First of all, it's been very warm in the Atlantic Ocean, not only during the past couple of months, but really during the past couple of years, and I don't expect that to change. Certainly, we'll take a look at sea surface temperature anomalies shortly, but warmer than normal conditions exist right now in the main breeding grounds region of the tropical Atlantic, and that should continue right through the summer and into the fall, in my opinion. Also very warm, above normal conditions in the Caribbean Sea, and the Gulf of Mexico is near normal, but it tends to, it looks like it'll turn more above normal, warmer than normal as we get into the summer season. Also, the Pacific Ocean, of course, plays a big role, not only for Pacific Ocean tropical activity, but also for the Atlantic Basin. Whenever there's an El Nino, warmer than normal sea surface temperatures in the tropical Pacific, that tends to be unfavorable for tropical activity in the Atlantic Ocean because it tends to be associated with increased wind shear, which is not a favorable factor for the intensification or even the development of tropical activity. But this year, it looks like we will be shifting to La Nina conditions, colder than normal water temperatures in the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean. That is a favorable factor for the development of tropical storms in the Atlantic Basin. Now, a lot of people out there are saying this will be one of the worst years ever. Armageddon coming in terms of the hurricane activity expected in the Atlantic Basin. I'm not quite in that camp. I do think there will be one unfavorable factor that will kind of pop its head every once in a while, and that is intrusions of Sahara desert air that moves from the northern part of Africa westward with trade winds out into the open waters of the Atlantic Ocean. It is an inhibiting factor for a tropical storm intensification or development, as it is really dry air. And indeed, there's an air mass right now over the eastern Atlantic Ocean that really has some of this Sahara desert air. And I think that'll happen on occasion over the next several months. And so that kind of puts a cap on what I still do believe will be an active year, but perhaps not an all-time record as some are predicting out there. Now, an interesting comparison to La Nina hurricane seasons in the past really strongly suggests that the most impacted regions may be the Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, and with that, the southeastern part of the U.S. And we'll take a look at an interesting climatology map of La Nina Atlantic hurricane seasons. Again, that suggests that the Caribbean Sea, Gulf of Mexico, and southeastern U.S. may be most directly impacted here by the tropical activity. And a lot of that could occur during the second half of the tropical season, when typically we have more of what I call homegrown tropical systems, those that develop closer to the U.S. in places like the southwestern Atlantic or the Gulf of Mexico or Caribbean Sea. And finally, we have some analog years that I settled on here, 5 years, that in my opinion mimic pretty closely what is happening right now across the Pacific Ocean, in that El Nino is falling apart and La Nina will take over certainly by the latter part of the spring and certainly into the summer tropical season. There are 5 analog years that helped me come up with this outlook of a more active tropical season, and it gives us some clues as to what to expect this summer across the nation in terms of temperatures and precipitation. Well, the first map I want to show here is the sea surface temperature anomaly map. And again, we've talked about the demise of El Nino and the renewal of La Nina conditions, colder than normal water temperatures in the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean. This is South America right here. We can see some blue really showing up just off the west coast of South America. That is colder than normal water now at the surface. It was beneath the surface a couple of months ago, but it's kind of bubbling up to the surface here. And you can kind of see, let me kind of clear the deck here, and you kind of see that is starting to extend westward out into the central part of the Pacific Ocean. And this should develop even more over the next several weeks, in that the sea surface temperatures out in the tropical Pacific Ocean will flip from above normal to below normal. And this is a key part to the forecast, that indeed I expect La Nina conditions, colder than normal waters through the bulk of the tropical season. Again, June, July, August we're talking about, even into September and October. I expect La Nina to be a dominant player out here. So that is certainly an interesting to monitor over the next several weeks. It's not there quite yet, but all the signs suggest La Nina will take over pretty soon out here in the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean. Now, in the Atlantic Ocean, we have a large area of well above normal sea surface temperatures, really extending into the Gulf of Mexico, but especially across the tropical Atlantic Ocean, Caribbean Sea. And that is a favorable factor. The warmer the sea surface temperatures, the better the chance for tropical development, tropical storm intensification. So La Nina in the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean is favorable for Atlantic Basin tropical activity, and warmer than normal conditions in the Atlantic itself is certainly a favorable factor for Atlantic Basin tropical activity. Well, certainly one of the reasons I have a lot of confidence that La Nina will indeed form over the next several weeks and dominate the scene in the Pacific Ocean this summer and into the fall is the fact that numerous computer forecast models, both dynamical and statistical models, suggest this will happen. This is one of the very latest compilations of numerous models here going forward in rolling 3-month periods for the temperature pattern, the temperature anomalies in the middle part of the Pacific Ocean, the central part of the tropical Pacific Ocean. We are now above, this is the neutral line right here, seeing this 0 line right here. Anything above that represents El Nino conditions, anything below that, La Nina conditions. Still, overall, El Nino conditions in the middle part of the Pacific Ocean. However, all these models suggest a big drop-off here over the next few months, so that by the time we get to, let's say, June, July, and August, we're basically in this area right here below that neutral line in La Nina territory. And again, these are rolling 3-month averages, so by the time you get to September, October, November, you're way down here, well below that neutral line here in La Nina territory. And it looks like it continues perhaps right into the upcoming winter season. So La Nina will play a role in the tropical season, may very well end up playing a role in the upcoming winter season of 2024 going into 2025. So again, a lot of confidence that indeed La Nina will form. It's not just a computer forecast models. A look at some of the observations favor this outcome as well. There's a lot of colder than normal water just beneath the surface in the tropical Pacific Ocean, and it's been bubbling up to the surface already. That has happened in the eastern Pacific, just off the west coast of South America, and it should be happening over the central part of the Pacific Ocean over the next several weeks. Well, we just saw that plume of numerous computer forecast models in the rolling 3-month average time periods going forward through the remainder of 2024. This is one particular forecast model put out by NOAA, known as the North American Multi-Model Ensemble. It's kind of a compilation of models. This is the sea surface temperature anomaly forecast map by this particular computer forecast model for August, September, and October. And no question, it has La Nina conditions shown here with these blues and dark blues, especially below normal sea surface temperatures. Again, on average for that 3-month period of August, September, October, right in the heart of the Atlantic Basin tropical season. So again, this is a favorable factor for Atlantic Basin tropical activity, in that wind shear should be on the low side during the summer tropical season when you have La Nina conditions out there over the Pacific Ocean. Low wind shear doesn't disrupt the development of the overall atmosphere in a tropical situation, so it's a favorable factor when you have low wind shear in the Atlantic Basin. Also, another factor we've talked about, the warm conditions in the Atlantic itself, not only in the Atlantic Ocean, but in the Caribbean Sea right here and the Gulf of Mexico. This particular forecast map has all of these areas above normal in terms of the sea surface temperatures, and I don't doubt that at all. The Atlantic Ocean in large part has been above normal for several years now, and it should continue through the summer into the fall. So again, two big favorable factors here for an active season in the Atlantic Basin. Again, I do expect it to be above normal, both in terms of the number of hurricanes and the number of major hurricanes as well. Perhaps not a record breaker because of that Sahara Desert dry air intrusion that I expect to happen on occasion during the next several months, but an active tropical season indeed. Now here's an interesting map that I found regarding La Nina Atlantic hurricane seasons going all the way back to 1880. What it represents here is a compilation of the tropical cyclone tracks, and no question there is a strong signal for this part of the Atlantic Basin to be most impacted during a La Nina hurricane season. The Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, and with that I include the southeastern part of the U.S. So this is why one of the bullets in the executive summary was perhaps the most impacted area this active hurricane season will be right here, the islands in and around the Caribbean Sea, Gulf of Mexico, and perhaps into the Gulf of Mexico states, the northern Gulf of Mexico states in the southeastern part of the U.S. Certainly does not mean a hurricane cannot go up the eastern seaboard. Of course that can still happen, but it looks like the dominating area of activity may very well be in that Caribbean Sea, Gulf of Mexico, southeastern U.S. region. Now again, we mentioned the selection of analog years, and largely based on past years where we had El Nino during the early months of a given year, followed by La Nina by the time the spring and especially the summer tropical season rolled around. And I kind of selected 5 particular analog years, and taking a look back at those analog years, the average of those years in terms of temperature anomalies and precipitation anomalies, can certainly provide some clues as to what to expect during this particular summer season. There's a clear signal from these analog years of basically a split in the nation, with cooler than normal conditions out across the western half of the nation and warmer than normal conditions out across the eastern half of the nation. So that is indeed what I'm favoring here, what I am predicting here in terms of the temperature anomaly pattern here across the nation. Again, cooler than normal across the western half, warmer than normal across the eastern half, and we're talking about for that June, July, August time period. Well, let's wrap up now by taking a look at the precipitation anomalies of those 5 analog years to get some kind of a clue as to the precipitation pattern this summer across the nation. It's kind of a mixed bag. Certainly looks like drier than normal conditions could develop for the summer season across Texas, Florida, and even into the Tennessee Valley, with maybe a wetter than normal summer season across much of the mid-Atlantic coastal states here and all the way up into much of New England as well. Mid-Atlantic and much of New England has had wetter than normal conditions throughout the spring, and it looks like that can continue through the summer tropical season. By the way, out in California, where they've had a very wet winter season going into the spring, looks like basically nearly normal conditions, which usually means dry for the summer season. So kind of a mixed bag in terms of precipitation. Depending on location, it could range from drier than normal to above normal, wetter than normal. So that's it for the tropical outlook. Again, all the maps and text we've gone through in this video discussion right there on the homepage in the article if you want more details. Bottom line, I expect an active tropical season in the Atlantic Basin based on 2 important factors: La Nina developing in the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean and a continuation of warmer than normal sea surface temperatures across the Atlantic Basin. Now, I don't expect a record-breaking type of year, largely because I do expect Sahara Desert dry air intrusions into the Atlantic Ocean on occasion during the next few months, and that'll kind of put a cap on the activity. Again, I do expect a more active than normal season, but not necessarily a record breaker. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.